All right, everyone, accept that recording disclaimer message. And now I'd like to turn it over to Renee Collins, who will be presenting the digital learning guidance for California adult ed practitioners.
All right, thank you, Marjorie. Thank you, Marjorie, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our presentation on the California Adult Education Digital Learning Guidance. We're excited to be able to share it with you. It will be presented by our team from the Outreach and Technical Assistance Network, or OTAN, as well as the International Society for Technology and Education, ISTE. My name is Renee Collins. I am the Director of Adult Education at Sacramento County Office of Education, overseeing OTAN and the CAPE Technical Assistance Project. And at this time, I would like to invite my colleagues to introduce themselves before we move on. Netta?
Hi, everyone. Netta Anasari. I'm the Technology Projects Coordinator at OTAN. I'm really excited. We listened to you. We heard all the digital needs of all of your students and your educators and administrators, and we were able to work with we have a great partnership with our friends at ISTE, so we're really excited to share with you the presentation today, and I'm going to hand it over to Anthony.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony Burek. I am the coordinator for distance learning projects at OTAN. I'm actually relatively new in my role since the summer. You'll see reference to Penny Pearson in our slides. Penny retired in July. I was fortunate enough to take over for Penny, so now serving in the coordinator role. And I'm excited to talk to you today more about the digital learning guidance. It's an exciting resource to share with the field, and we have a lot to say and share with you today. So I'm going to pass it over to Caroline.
Hello, everybody. My name is Caroline McKinnon. I work for ISTE, specifically on the SkillRise team, and it's been an honor to work with OTAN on this project. You will see me popping up towards the end. And the one thing I want to alert everybody to at this stage is we have a Jamboard that we're going to be using throughout this presentation. I'm just about to put it into chat for everybody. Feel free to open it up, reflect throughout, but we will have some time towards the end for everybody to reflect as well. And I will hand it back.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Caroline and all. So let's get started. Even though California adult educators have been engaged in providing distance learning for quite a few years at this time, the pandemic was a huge shift to instruction conducted almost exclusively online. Especially challenging was the lack of hardware for our students and limited or no internet connectivity. As the pandemic evolved, it became clear that additional guidance was needed to support delivery of instruction at a distance. CDE, Adult Education Office, or Carolyn Zachary, initiated a discussion with me, or OTAN, to develop guidance that would both document what has transpired over the last 2 years, but also provide research-based information about best practices when incorporating digital learning into instruction. Next slide. So the development team that put together the digital learning guidance was a mix of SCOE and OTAN, as well as ISTE and CASAS, CalPro, and WestEd. So from SCOE, OTAN, it was myself, Penny Pearson, Netta, and John Fleischman, who's the former director of OTAN. From ISTE, it was Dr. Brandon Olszewski, Caroline, who's with us today, Caitlin McLemore, who was an outstanding researcher and writer for ISTE, as well as Leah Downing and Joey Lehrman. And then we had CASAS and CalPro and WestEd write segments of the digital learning guidance that applied to their work in assessment, professional development, and data-driven instruction. And they were crucial partners in this work as well. So want to just acknowledge their participation. Next slide. All right, so I do not want you to even try to read what's on the slide here, but what I do want you to pay attention to is the red print, which is the many advisors who provided input to the digital learning guidance, adult ed practitioners from throughout the state, There was just a depth and a breadth of knowledge and expertise that came together around this project. 3 Zoom meetings were held during the 6-month development period, and all of the meetings were well attended by this group. The 40-member advisory included classified staff, instructors, subject matter experts, coordinators, administrators, researchers, CDE staff, and national staff experts, or national experts, I'm sorry. The advisors offered their expertise in a variety of ways, including input on the initial outline, feedback on draft versions of the guidance, recommendations for individuals to feature in the written and video vignettes, which you'll see some of the video vignettes in just a little while, and suggestions for future editions or iterations of the guidance. Next slide. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Carolyn Zachary, the State Director of Adult Education at the California Department of Education. Carolyn is going to speak to us about the important role for guidance, which is to offer guidance to teachers and to support personnel who work closely with our students so that digital tools are fully incorporated as part of ongoing instruction. Let's take a moment to listen.
I'm Dr. Carolyn Zachary, and I am the Education Administrator and State Director for the California Department of Education, overseeing the Adult Education Office. The adult educators are looking for a roadmap that will help them to continue what they've put into place over the last 2 years. This guide will help reinforce areas of strength that they have seen and they've been able to adapt, but the guide will also give them additional tools to ensure that they're meeting students' accessibility needs, that they are looking at other ways of instruction. Perhaps they're used to doing synchronous only, and they're going to dive into that idea of doing something asynchronously. That's where I really think this guide will help those educators throughout the state of California to move beyond what they've been doing and to make it part of their normal practice of using technology and online instruction.
Great. Okay. So with that kickoff from Carolyn, and I did want to point out, just this last week, Carolyn released a letter to the field about the importance of the digital learning guidance. So if you have not seen that letter yet, maybe check your emails, or we will have it available on the OTAN website as well. So we're excited for the support from our California Department of Education. So the learning guidance has 7 chapters, and I'm just briefly going to introduce them to you. The introduction provides the purpose of the guidance, the audience. It gives a brief history of distance learning in California, and it has the summary of the literature review that was conducted. Chapter 2, Ensuring Equity and Access, talks about devices, connectivity, understanding learners' needs, accessibility, and the universal design for learning. Chapter 3, Foundations of Adult Education and Digital Learning, speak to the adult learning theories that are available to us, the standards in the field, digital learning, and professional development. Chapter 4, Designing Flexible Learning Experiences, is all about blended learning, digital learning tools, open educational resources, evaluating tools, and content. Chapter 5, Adopting Models That Work, includes digital learning models, planning, and reporting. Chapter 6, Data-Driven Instruction and Digital Assessments, talks about the purpose and the advantages of testing and the various testing modalities. And Chapter 7, Fostering Healthy, Equitable, and Inclusive Digital Communities, talks about community building, social emotional learning, educator well-being, and digital citizenship. Plus, it will include, or it does include, a comprehensive literature review, if you're one of those people who like to dive into the research, a glossary of terms, an epilogue, and an executive summary of the document. And we're going to kind of take a deeper dive into each of these chapters through the next through the rest of our time together. Next slide. In addition to the comprehensive written guidance, 4 videos were created. The purpose of creating the videos was to bring the guidance to life, to hear from educators and administrators about how they use digital technology to facilitate and improve instruction at their sites. Interviews were conducted with 11 teachers and administrators in Northern, Central, and Southern California. And you can see the locations right there. Next slide. 18 written vignettes have also been included in the guidance. The vignettes, or voices from the field, serve to illustrate and bring to life the content that is addressed in each of the chapters. The vignette format is Q&A, and they range in length from a couple of paragraphs to a full page. The teachers and administrators featured in the vignettes are from locations throughout California, and they represent educators from small and large agencies. Next slide. A formal literature review was conducted to curate and synthesize existing scholarly research on distance education and digital learning in adult education. The literature review informed the writing of the guidance, and information from the literature review is integrated throughout the guide where appropriate. To be included in the literature review, sources were required to be peer-reviewed or from a reputable non-corporate source, be published within the last 20 years, focus on digital learning or distance education, focus on adult education or non-traditional learners in higher education, use an andragogical lens, and support the aims of the guidance. Next, thank you. The guidance is a lengthy document, more than 100 pages. It's a lengthy document because there are many things that adult educators need to understand if they're going to effectively use technology with their learners. First is equitable access. Ensuring access is absolutely essential. Many adult learners can't afford internet access, or they're on very slow connections. Also, they may not have an appropriate digital device. And by appropriate, we mean something larger than a 4-inch screen. Second is appropriate content. There is a growing body of knowledge of instructional content, including commercial, open education, and free or freemium. But some of that content is not well designed. Digital content needs to be at the appropriate level for your learners. Content needs to be accurate and culturally appropriate, and it needs to meet the criteria for good instructional design. Third is prepared teachers. This third element, which is equally important to the first two, is a well-prepared teacher. Instructors need to be thoroughly familiar with not only the technology devices they're using, but also the software or the digital content. Being aware of and demonstrating an understanding of these 3 elements of digital learning will help guarantee success for our learners. Next slide. So chapter 1, the introduction. The chapter includes information about the purpose and the audience, which first and foremost are instructors. But it's also very useful information for support staff who work very closely with our learners, for administrators, and we believe it will offer good guidance for policymakers. In the late 1980s, the California Adult Education Office understood the potential for distance and digital-based learning. A strategic planning process led to alternative models for funding non-seat time-based instruction. And in 1989, the Adult Education Office wisely funded OTAN, which continues to support the effective implementation of technology with adult education programs across the state. Chapter 1 also introduces the critical standards that are essential to moving forward with digital learning. Those standards include CASAS, the College and Career Readiness Standards for Adult Education, the California Standards for the Teaching Profession, the International Society for Technology and Education Standards, the National Standards for Quality Online Learning, and the SkillRise program and ISTE initiative. We believe each of these standards offer an important structure for establishing clear expectations for learners, improving curriculum and instruction, measuring learning outcomes, and developing effective programs. Chapter 2, digital equity, ensuring equity and access. As most of you know, almost all of our learners have some sort of digital device. Clearly, a mobile phone is an essential device for most everyone, but it's not the most ideal device for improving literacy or language skills. To address this concern from the state level, California's Closing the Digital Divide initiative includes funding and support to help learners obtain digital devices needed to access learning, including laptops and tablets, modems and routers, and Wi-Fi hotspots. Perhaps one of the greatest issues today is the lack of adequate connectivity for our learners. Sadly, the USA ranks 27th in the world with connectivity. But over the next couple of years, we should see a significant improvement. This chapter includes information on how you can help your students with getting a cheaper, faster, and more reliable connection. As an instructor, you need to be aware of the Affordable Connectivity Program, the Emergency Connectivity Fund, and perhaps most importantly, you need to understand and take advantage of the new Digital Equity Act, which includes nearly $3 billion to address digital equity and inclusion. A major section of this chapter focuses on building digital infrastructure. This includes information about what you need to know about software licensing, device maintenance, technical support, and technology training. Next slide. Not so long ago, we could survive in our world without strong digital literacy skills. Today, however, digital literacy skills are essential. They're necessary life skills. Without them, you can't apply for a job, get a meal at a restaurant, or learn about the world around you. This section of the guide goes into detail about what a learner needs to know to navigate our digital world. Included is information about useful frameworks such as the SkillRise initiative and Digital Navigator model. And finally, this chapter focuses on the important issues surrounding accessibility, including the universal design for learning, a flexible learning-centered framework that helps educators design learning experiences that are accessible to all learners. Next slide. At this time, I'm going to introduce Elisa Takeuchi. Elisa is an ESL instructor at Garden Grove Adult Education. She is also a remote ESL instructor for Tamalpais Adult School and a subject matter expert for OTAN. Elisa speaks about the importance of making digital instruction practical and relevant for the lives of students. Let's take a listen.
My name is Elisa Takeuchi. I am an ESL instructor for Garden Grove Adult Education. I am also a remote ESL teacher for Tamalpais Adult School, and I'm a subject matter expert for OTAN. Making it practical for the students is really important too. We shouldn't be teaching them things that it may not be relevant for them outside of the classroom, but navigating systems or using their phones more, I think would really be helpful in that, back in the day, we used to say no phones in the classroom. But now we're at that point, it's like, yeah, pull out your phone, let's go ahead and start exploring some of the things that you can do with your phones and using that beyond the classroom so that you are successful with going to school or getting a new job or family life. And those are the things that are going to make students feel like they're okay with technology, and then they can move on to other things as well.
Great. Before we move forward, and I pass it off to Anthony, I just wanted to, I looked in the chat and I didn't see any questions, but if there are any questions, this might be a good time to answer a couple if anybody wants to pop them in the chat, and then we can direct them to to the right individual. I'll give you a minute to do that. I don't know if people are busy writing or maybe have no questions, but I'll slowly pass it off to Anthony, and then maybe Anthony, you can determine when to move forward. Oh, there we go. Kathleen commented, I'm following your presentation in the PDF guide itself on OTAN's homepage. Perfect. Good. You found it. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to make sure that we put that link to the digital learning guidance webpage on the OTAN website that you can, where you can get a copy of the guidance document itself. You can see the videos. I think Renee introduced that in the very beginning of our presentation. But just in case you need the link to get to our page, that's now in the chat. It could be that you're already overwhelmed by what Renee has already presented to us. I know that that is definitely, the topics about equity and access that Renee referenced in chapter 2. Those were a lot of big concerns that we face back at our agencies. Of course, how do we get our students connected? How do we get our teachers connected? Are the devices available? Are they working? Are we sharing them with everyone in our family? What does our data plan look like? So on and so on and so on. Do I live out in the rural parts of California where connectivity is an issue already without a pandemic on top of it? So that's that chapter 2 is a pretty weighty chapter in and of itself, and yet here comes some more chapters for you all to think about. So I'm going to take a few minutes here to talk about chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 3, the title of chapter 3 is Foundations of Adult Education and Digital Learning. So there are a number of topics that are covered in this chapter. We start off by talking about adult learning theories. And for those of us in adult education, we know all about andragogy, different from pedagogy, different from K-12 and what's going on with children. The learning needs of adults are unique, and so a starting point for all of us is andragogy. But we also talk about some other adult learning theories, for example, experiential, self-directed, transformative. So, we're in the 21st century. There's been a lot of discussion over the last 20 plus years about 21st century skills, and a lot of them have to do with learner autonomy, learner self-direction, learners being able to kind of get what they need and use it for a variety of purposes in their lives. And so in addition to a recap of andragogy for many of us, we also want folks to explore some other adult learning theories that are out there, and especially to think about how we might be able to use technology to move learners more towards autonomous, self-directed learning, right? We want to empower our learners with information and with skills. And so by being able to look deeper into some other adult learning theories, hopefully some of the ideas that are contained in those theories, we can start to use them in our programs as we kind of relook at our curriculum, as we relook at our learning materials, and really, putting the power of education into the students' hands. So that's really the main purpose, I think, for including those adult learning theories, so that we have an opportunity to look at some of the details of those theories and think about how we might be using them in our classrooms, in our programs, in our schools, and in our communities as well. The next section has to do with research-based practices. So, I know a lot of us have run into this issue of finding a lot of good, reliable research on adult education and adult learning. Certainly not to the extent of what's being researched on the K-12 side of the house, but our authors and subject matter experts and researchers who are part of the guidance, putting the guidance document together, really kind of sought out the best research that we could find on digital learning and adult education. And again, there's not a lot of it, but what is out there is very useful and reliable. And so we've made reference to a number of those research pieces. They're also included in the now I can't think of it, the literature review at the very end of the guidance document. This is important information for all of us to understand about our learners, the situations they find themselves in, barriers to digital learning, and a whole host of topics. So, and to take that research and to be able to use that research in a practical way as we think about how do we deliver learning to our adult learners. So that the learning that the students are doing is based on research, it's based on sound instructional practice. And so we wanted to make sure that folks had a chance to take a look at some of that research that we are referencing, not only in this chapter, but throughout the guidance document as well. So the next part of this chapter has to do with standards in adult education. So we referenced a few in particular here. So the CSTP, so California Standards for the Teaching Profession. Again, maybe not so widely well known on the adult ed side of the house as opposed to the K-12, but these are really good teaching standards that all of us can look at for guidance. They do have things to say about the use of technology in the classroom. The standards themselves are a little old. They're certainly pre-pandemic. So they didn't really anticipate what we've been going through for the last couple of years, and yet, especially when it comes to the use of technology in the classroom and digital learning, there are standards that we can look to in the CSTP that will give us some guidance, especially when we, craft our lessons and we think about our curriculum in the classroom, how we might be integrating good teaching practices and standards into our instruction, into the materials that we use in our class, and ultimately how we interact with the students in our class as well. We also take a look at some other external standards, so including the ISTE standards. Certainly Caroline can speak to the ISTE standards as a member of ISTE, but the ISTE standards are very good. They're very much focused on the use of technology in the classroom, but also developing digital learners, digital citizens, and also they have standards not only for the teachers, but also for coaches, for administrators, and also just kind of program standards as well. So ISTE is a good reference in this regard, especially as we think about how to really bring technology standards to bear into our classroom, our programs, our curriculum, things like that. Caroline, the next slide, please. But wait, there's more. Also in this chapter, we talk about, I'm going to skip down a couple of bullets to the digital learning and professional development. So, certainly events like the Cape Summit are chock full of professional development. We're really thinking about how to take that professional development on a wide variety of topics, but also specifically on digital learning, the use of technology in the classroom, the use of technology in schools and programs, building up our learners' digital skills, and really thinking about maybe perhaps being a little bit more targeted and focused in our professional development. So we're really kind of honing in on the skills that we need as educators to be able to impart to our students. So what does that digital learning, what are those digital learning PD opportunities look like? How should we be structuring our PD so that we can effectively transmit those skills and abilities to our teachers, then to our students in the classroom? So we spend some time in this chapter talking about digital learning and PD. And again, sometimes we tend to think about PD for the classroom educators for sure, but certainly we also want to think about PD for our support staff and administrators as well as counselors, transition specialists, other folks, other stakeholders in adult education. So it takes a village. I think we've learned that the last couple of years. So, not only did teachers have to figure out how to teach online, but our support staff had to figure out how to work online. We had to figure out how to keep the school doors open virtually, and how to keep folks, in our programs, in our schools. And so when we think about PD, we have to think about the whole child, but the whole school, right? So teachers, support staff, administrators. But again, we want to think about what is the technology angle that we want to bring to bear on the PD and digital learning that's going on at the school. Finally, in this chapter, we talk a bit about communities of practice and also PD communities as well. I know a lot of adult ed agencies and schools are using communities of practice, again, on a wide variety of topics. A lot of them, for example, are focusing on data, which is a great use of a COP. So it's sort of an intensive look at what data should we look at? What is the data telling us? All those sorts of good things. But we can also have communities of practice and PD communities that also focus on technology usage at the school too. And how do we develop a digital literacy program that'll benefit our students, so that we really use the power of our communities to figure out collectively how we create those opportunities for our students. What is it that we should be focusing on? Again, especially related to the use of technology in the classroom, in the program, in the school, in the community, in the students' lives, in a variety of ways. So we spent some time talking about what those communities of practice might look like, how to organize them, what are some of the topics that those communities might bring to bear for study. So that's basically chapter 3. Why don't we move on to the next chapter, chapter 4, Caroline? Oh, sorry. Oh, we have a video for, sorry. Out of order here. So we have a video now from another OTAN subject matter expert, Yesenia Delgado. Yesenia works at the Hacienda La Puente Adult Education Program in Southern California. And we're going to hear from her about digital learning and with our adult learners. So.
My name is Yesenia Delgado Lorenzo, and I am a counselor and instructor at Hacienda La Puente Adult School. The most impactful professional development is going to be working with OTAN through the Digital Learning Academy. I had the opportunity to collaborate with 2 other teachers, and we were able to take a whole course on how to bring technology into our classrooms. And I think the support of the administrators through that process and allowing us to try the new ideas in the classroom was definitely impactful because we saw the growth. We saw the growth from using no Chromebooks in the classroom, teachers being scared of using the Chromebooks themselves, to fully engaged classrooms where the teacher was at the front of the class teaching and the students were following along with their Chromebooks. So that has been one of the most rewarding and most impactful experiences because we saw the growth as we kind of went through the Leadership Academy. So it was a 2-year program. So we saw it from 0, and then it kind of went into the pandemic. So by the time pandemic started, we were ready, and we saw the difference in how quickly our classes moved to Zoom, how quickly we moved everything online. And I think a lot of it had to do with us being really well prepared and having that action plan ready to move forward with digital technology in the classrooms.
Okay, so before we move on to chapter 4, just I really liked Yesenia's message about digital learning and professional development. I like her referencing the community aspect of it. So not only the folks who went through the PD opportunities, but administrators who supported that the efforts, that it was sort of a long-term effort, also intentional. And as the teaching core at Hacienda La Puente was going through their training in PD, they really were able to support each other, so that no one really felt alone, experimenting with technology or trying to figure it out on their own. So these are the kinds of things that we talk about in chapter 3. Okay, so the next chapter, another big topic, designing flexible learning experiences is the title of this chapter. So we really start off by talking about kind of the emphasis on flexibility that maybe that, there's not one way to create a learning experience. Certainly, in the last couple of years in the pandemic, having to be online fully for many of us. Some folks were already doing sort of a hybrid setup during the pandemic, maybe limited in person, but also reliance on online as well. So, sort of post-COVID, we're thinking about, well, okay, we've just been through this experience over the last couple of years. What is it that we can bring from that experience back with us into the classroom, into our programs, into our schools, and really create kind of flexible opportunities for students, right? So we know that some students can come to the building. They can come in person, no problem, right? We also know some folks can't come to the building. They have no way to get there, no transportation, their work schedule doesn't allow for it. Childcare issues, we know the whole litany of issues. So what about those students, creating something online that's available for them, based on what we've been doing the last couple of years? And then are there other opportunities to put those two things together into blended hybrid online learning situations, learning experiences? So really, this is kind of the focus of the chapter, is really for all of us to start kind of, as much as we had to shift our mindset a couple of, 2.5 years ago, we're kind of asking the field to shift its mindset again, right? To think about not just the in-person by itself, not just the online by itself, but some combination of these things, but more importantly, being able to offer a number of options to students, right? We can have the in-person, we can have the online, we can also have a blend of the two. And so we're really thinking about how to design for that flexibility in our programs, in our classes and our programs in our schools, and really being able to offer students options, especially our adult students, again, hearkening back to the adult learning theory, where we know that our adults they're busy people. They have a lot of things going on in their lives. They're doing their best to include education as one of the things going on in their lives. So we want to meet them and be flexible in meeting them so that we offer them options that they can take advantage of. So the next part of this chapter has to do with Oh, sorry, Carolyn. The next, if we can just go back one. Thank you so much. I did want to make reference to the technology integration frameworks and models. So there are a number of them out there. Some of you have heard about SAMR. Some of you have heard about TPACK. The graphic that we have here on the slide is actually a reference to the EEE framework, so which includes engagement, extension, and enhancement. Actually, EEE is something that OTAN has been exploring over the last couple of years, and we've been really thinking about how we can educate the field on EEE, using it as a possible framework for organizing your lessons, thinking about how to intentionally and well-designed use technology in the classroom. And then, what does that look like when it comes down to the lesson level? Like, are we really using technology to truly engage students, or are we just using it to entertain? Are we able to enhance what's going on in the classroom with the use of technology? Or is it just sort of like an add-on that we think would be a good idea to have around? Are we able to extend the lesson using technology? When we talk about like flipped classrooms, things of that sort. So we really are trying to have people sort of put a frame around their lessons and curriculum activities in the classroom. And the one that we've been talking about lately has to do with the EEE framework. But there are others that are also referenced in chapter 4 as well. Okay, Caroline, now next slide. Okay, so also in the chapter, we spend a lot of time talking about the digital tools that we would be using in these flexible learning environments. So the first bullet that we see here has to do with digital learning tools, but for a couple of different purposes, right? One is for communication, but another is for collaboration. They're very different reasons for using digital tools, digital learning tools. And so What that means is that we have to be very intentional in the tools that we choose to use in the classroom. I know, again, 2 years ago, that spring of 2020, all of a sudden, all the tools came out of the woodwork, right? And so it was very difficult to sort of figure out, like, what am I going to use this tool? What's the best use of this tool, right? Versus this other tool that can do something else, and what's the best use of that tool? So really, again, we want to take what we've been learning over the last couple of years and really think about and be very intentional in how we select these tools and what we ultimately use these tools for, or in what context, right? So we have some discussion about, the distinction between these two kind of big topics, communication versus collaboration. We talked about OER earlier, open educational resources. So really thinking about what sorts of free resources are out there that we can bring to the classroom, but also thinking about, with kind of a critical eye, like we want to make sure that these OER, that they're sound, research-based, they're, they've been tested in classrooms. We understand what is going to be the impact of these of the resources that we bring to our classroom. We want to think about how they match up with learning objectives and learning goals that are a part of our lessons. So it's not just that we pick a free tool because it's free, but we pick a free tool because it's going to have a high impact in the classroom. So this is our part of our discussion about the OER. And then again, sort of continuing that discussion just in terms of evaluating digital content, digital resources, digital tools. We've all learned, like, there are lots and lots and lots and lots of tools out there, right? So we want to be very intentional in our choices about what we're going to use in the classroom, what's going to make the most sense for our adult learners, what are the skills that can be imparted by using digital tools. So we want to be very thoughtful about the tools that we select, and we don't want to face the situation where we bring a tool into the classroom and then it just sort of sits on the digital shelf, right? Because no one's willing to invest their time in learning how to use the tool. They don't really know why it's there in the first place. They're not really sure of what the impact is, and they just don't have time to figure that all out on their own. So we want to be very clear about the tools that we choose, why we choose them, and so forth. Finally, just in terms of the flexibility, again, we're thinking about how do we make learning for our adult learners more individualized, more differentiated, more personalized. Technology is a tool that we can bring to bear in this regard. So we spent some time talking about what that might look like. What are some of the elements that we have to consider in the design of these pathways? And how can we really bring education down to a more individual, personalized level for students? Again, depending on their level of technology, their digital ability, what it is that they hope to get, what are their goals, what is it they hope to get out of the classroom and their learning. So we think about how do we use technology to do some of that design work. So next slide. Okay, and with that, unless there are other questions, I'm going to pass it off to Netta for the next part.
All right. Hello, everybody. So let's take that deep breath. Lots of information is being shared with us. Take a good, nice stretch as you're thinking about what we've already talked about, right? So did we listen to you or what? Our state really is paying attention to the outcomes of your continuous improvement plan and some of the goals that you've been setting, some of those conversations that we've had pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, post-pandemic, if that's what we're in. But, when it comes to ensuring equity and access, designing learning more about all the theories out there and designing these digital learning opportunities. So know that, our state leaders are listening to us, and here it is, this, fantastic guidance document that's here to support all of your work at your agencies, even bringing in all those advisors, not only from our agencies within California, but then statewide, or rather nationwide, that contributed to the conversations about what adult learners need to be successful in our classrooms. So keep those questions coming. We are monitoring the chat. Feel free to add comments and or questions and contribute to the conversation via chat, please. So I'm going to dive a little deep into Chapter 5. And Chapter 5 is discussing adapting models that work. And so these are models that we've heard before, right? So let's talk a little bit about digital learning models. Distance education, we've heard that before. Blended learning, HyFlex learning, big buzzword nowadays. So distance learning is a broad term that it brings in so much information about the physical learning that happens outside the classroom. So you're not in the physical classroom, you're learning outside the classroom. This has been happening way before the pandemic, way before online learning, when you used to pick up packets and learn from home, right? So this is really kind of just helping us define. So this information, these models, we're helping you define them in the guidance document. And then we are also discussing models that work, especially along the lines of blended learning, where we've included, ideas and models of flipped classrooms, station rotation, lab rotation, individual rotation, and flex. We've all heard those terms before. So we're bringing that back into how do you adapt them with the models of distance, blended, and HyFlex. So then we want to go into a little bit about the planning and implementation. And with everything that we're adapting, we're including at our agency with digital learning and these models, we know that there are challenges. Of course, there are successes. Of course, we have those students that we know are doing a great job and we understand their needs and we are meeting them all the way at 100%. But then, of course, there are challenges when it comes to devices, when it comes to resources, when it comes to access, when it comes to all these different implementation models along professional development and how to get teachers to fully execute these models in their classrooms. So in this chapter, we're addressing and we're planning for challenges to implement. And then, of course, for of course, I'm not going to say that word correctly. Interoperability. It's been a long day and I've been talking a lot, so I apologize for that. But so when we talk about this, we're also putting into the chapter the reporting considerations. So it is really important for us to address what we need to do to get those, dare I say, gains, right? And are we addressing everything that the NRS is telling us to address in our reporting? So everything in this chapter, when we're adapting models that work, really address those reporting considerations. And those reporting considerations are signed in to this chapter to address each item. When it comes to NRS, the National Reporting System, and especially when it comes to the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act requirements as well. So I want to transition over to our next video where you're going to hear from Ryan De La Vega. He's a ESL resource teacher at Torrance Adult School. Ryan specifically speaks to us on the variety of needs or the variety of models when conducting in a blended and a distance learning environment.
My name is Ryan De La Vega. My title is ESL resource teacher. So I'm the lead of the department. And I work at Torrance Adult School in Torrance, California. We're kind of experimenting with all different kinds of models, a HyFlex, hybrid, and 100% online and 100% face-to-face. One class we're just calling it a modified HyFlex, where we have 2 days face-to-face in the classroom with the teacher and 2 days online, where the teacher is teaching just like they did at the beginning of the pandemic, 100% internet, online, video conferencing, where the teacher can put students in breakout rooms and they can work together as a group or a team towards a common goal.
All right, does that sound familiar? I'm going to go backwards for just a second. Does that sound familiar, what you've been doing? Maybe you did it pre-pandemic, maybe you did it post-pandemic or during the pandemic. So these are educators in the field sharing their stories with you and how to continue to do this work, how to continue to use these models continuously in your classrooms moving forward, even if we do go back to a majority of in-person. This guide is really designed in this chapter specifically to help you continue to adapt that model. So
my name is Ryan De La.
Didn't mean to do that. Okay. Let me pause for a second. Let's check in because I am actually presenting. I'm the one that's flipping the slides. So let's see if there are any questions or comments. I'm going to ask Anthony to come on mic and let me know if are there any questions?
Yeah, and I've been actually responding in the chat. So Audrey asked a very simple question, but her question is, what models work? So she also asked what was the #1 recommendation. And so what I've been responding to in the chat is, you know, it really, in my estimation, it really depends on sort of the issues you're trying to address at your school or in your community or in your classroom. It's not that you should, you know, it's not that we recommend one over the other. We really want folks to consider a model that's going to make the most sense for the context in which you find yourself, right? So, for example, you know, for many rural communities, folks just cannot drive the distance to get to a building, right? And they can't do that in a sustained way, right? So really, you know, some sort of a distance learning model, some sort of an online model is going to work. However, there may also be the possibility that we do a blend where that those students maybe actually do come to the in-person, maybe one time a month, for example, right? And even coming that one time a month is a blend, right? It's not pure distance, it's not pure online. So that's one situation. But another situation, I can't remember now what session was mentioned in, maybe, I don't know, this one or another one before, but maybe, for example, we heard, oh, it was in our jam session an hour ago, where they said, you know, the students up front at registration say, you know what, I can really only come like 2 days a week or 3 days a week. I can't come every single day. So that's a different context for a blend, right? So that's why it really depends on what are the issues you're trying to address within your community and what model is going to make the most sense in that context. That's my opinion. So if anyone else wants to chime in on that.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Hey, you know, one thing I always like to say is we're adult learners, right? So how do I learn on, you know, online or in the classroom? How do you learn, Audrey, that way? Anthony, everybody's learning experiences are different, right? And depends on the learner need, depends on what their, you know, reading score is, it depends on their math score. These are all things that we're going to start evaluating. And that's what the guide is really discussing. It's not one specific model that works. It's all the models that could potentially work to meet the needs of your individual students, right? Yes, of course, we're not saying design specific, you know, in a perfect world, yes, we're supposed to design, you know, learning experiences for individual students. But, you know, as we start learning about ourselves as adult learners and we're learning about our students who are us, right? Then we're looking at the different models that are out there or a combination of models that are out there to meet each individual student's needs. Okay. We are headed towards the end here. The guide is about 7 chapters, so we're headed into the end here. So chapter 6 is all about data-driven instruction and digital assessments. And so in chapter 6, it really is there to explore the purposes of assessments and how digital assessments inform instruction and enhance teaching and learning. The various assessments that are considered are standardized assessments, remote testing, digital skills assessments, and other informal assessments. This chapter explores a variety of digital assessment tools as well. So it kind of starts with answering some important questions about the test and why it's important for both the learner and the teacher. In the next section, it addresses the value and the usefulness of analyzing data and digital assessments. Included in this chapter are also useful descriptions on standardized assessments, including CASAS tests. Yes, remember Renee told us a little while ago who our partners with. We were partnering with to build this. It was our CASAS friends. And then when it comes to, you know, assessments that are leaning towards or for our high school diploma students and our high school equivalency students. So that's why you see there also the HSC performance-based testing. Several pages are devoted to the subject of remote testing, which is also something that we've learned in the last couple of years, which has been an ongoing challenge in all educational sectors. Included are the policies for remote testing in California, as well as a description and the benefits and the challenges of doing testing at a distance. I'm going to keep going on this chapter, and we're going to talk a little bit about the digital skills assessments, digital badging. Digital skills assessments are becoming increasingly important as technology becomes more important in our society. The section highlights several adult education programs and assessment tools that focus specifically on measuring the digital literacy skills of our learners. So you could see many, in our previous jam session, we heard, that there are vendors out there like Technomedia, for example. Another one that we've heard that has been most useful and affordable is that measures digital literacy would be North Star Digital Literacy. And it's also described in the guide as well. As documented in this chapter is the value of the usefulness of an informal assessment, including digital badging. We've all heard digital badging and how students can use digital badging to potentially get into certification programs, get the job, earn additional badges that kind of show that their competencies. And finally, this chapter finishes with a great discussion on digital assessment tools. Some of the examples include quizzes, gamification, portfolios, and so on. So my data geeks out there, my data nerds, where are you at? I know you're out there. This is a really rich chapter, and we really do kind of take, all angles of data and data-driven instruction. I know when I was working at the agency and we were looking at what are we doing in the classroom to support the actual learning of our students, and how do we see it, and how do we see it versus our points when they enter our program, and as we check in with post-testing, and are we looking at that gains, and then if we're looking at those gains, what are we doing to address the specific subjects in our classrooms moving forward. So I'm really excited for you all to see all the chapters, and again, for the data nerds out there, I know that you'll truly enjoy chapter 6. I'm going to hand it over.
Netta?
Yeah.
Sorry, there actually are a couple of questions in the chat.
Great. Wonderful.
So one question from Connie Pekadis. Hi, Connie. Does that chapter 6 have recommendations on how to do remote CASAS testing for pre-post testing?
It does. It does have some recommendations, and it talks about just kind of the law that supports kind of, those pieces. CASAS really kind of took this and discussed the importance, but also kind of the limitations and or the pieces that you have to consider when it comes to remote testing. So yes.
And Renee actually directed Connie to the pages in the guidance document.
Great.
But Connie's follow-up question, particularly when students do not have the technology needed, question mark. So I'm not sure, I don't know if you can do remote testing if they don't have the technology.
Right, they need the technology, right? So they are going to need their, approved device. It goes through their security pieces, and then, the testing goes through that. So you will need the technology to support remote testing.
And then one other question from our friend Carla from the building. Are digital skills assessments updated regularly to reflect the constant evolution of technology?
So there are big plans for us to continuously keep this document live and continue to make it something that is regularly used by our agencies. So I, of course, invite everybody on the line to take a look at the document. And of course, Renee, I hope, she also invites everybody. I'll speak for her for a little bit. But yes, we want to continue to keep this document updated. We want to continuously update it with the changing, ever-changing needs of new tech, new devices, assessment needs, the needs of our students, and so on and so forth. I mean, that's the goal. And that's why we're partnered with an amazing agency like ISTE, who are the leaders when it comes to everything tech for education, to continue our partnership and to continue to update our document.
Yeah, there is the danger that as soon as you publish something on technology that it's automatically outdated. So exactly to Netta's point, we are doing our best at OTAN with ISTE, with other partners, to make sure that we also are keeping ourselves up to date and sharing that information with the field. So we plan to have that as a part sort of moving forward of our guidance document and other resources we're going to share in the future. So
I also see a question about whether it's going to be shared, and it actually should have been already shared. And I'll actually ask Renee to answer that question. Renee, is this slide deck shared already on the website?
Yeah, yes. If you, and I will double check that as well, but it should be when you clicked, I guess, on our session, you can click into an added description about the session, and within that, there should be the linked slideshow. I will go and double check that right now, but definitely it should be accessible to you.
And if it's not for any reason, we will make sure that it is posted, and so that you can grab a copy. It will be posted on the platform. Any other questions around data? I saw you, Carla and Connie. I knew you were thinking about stuff. Let's see. Okay, it's not yet. Okay, the slide deck is not there yet. Okay, we will go back and look and talk to to Veronica and the team and see when they will be posted. But the goal is to make sure that you have access to it through the platform. All right, I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to hand it over to our amazing colleague, Caroline McKinnon from ISTE.
Good afternoon, and I'm kind of rounding out this session here, and you might notice that my background is getting darker and darker. That's because I'm on the East Coast, so it's pitch black outside, so I just wanted to point that out. So chapter 7, it focuses on fostering healthy, equitable, and inclusive digital communities. And this chapter examines the role of the learner as one of many competing roles in adult learner lives. If you think about the lives we have, it's just a small part of it. We have families, jobs, we have commitments outside of learning. But it also shares strategies for cultivating educator and learner well-being, developing educator agency in creating inclusive learning environments, and fostering digital citizenship. The chapter concludes by addressing the role of community as a central facet of digital learning experience. So healthy, equitable, and inclusive communities are precursors to deep learning and developing meaningful relationships in online spaces. Cultivating a positive, safe, and supportive classroom community can be challenging and requires effort. It doesn't just happen. And I'm sure that many people in this room have experienced that, especially in the last couple of years. In K-12, there's a lot of focus on social emotional learning, or SEL. It's become increasingly important. Similarly, it may be just as important of working with adults, but the world hasn't quite caught up yet, but it really should. So I'm interested on a personal note to know who is working within the area of SEL. Yeah? Because if learners are anxious, fearful, or stressed, then negative emotions can impact their ability to focus their attention, follow instructions, or even engage with learning activities. So the section of the guidance in chapter 7 talks about how to build positive, safe, and supportive relationships. Adult educators also need support for their well-being. In this section and in Appendix A, there is specific information and resources provided for you. And last but not least, digital citizenship. As our world becomes more and more digital, it is critical to consider what it means to be a citizen in a digital world. The concept of digital citizenship can help educators and learners to take a proactive approach to interacting with others in the digital spaces. The classroom provides a safe, supportive environment for developing as a positive digital citizen and a model for others. If we could go to the next slide. Yeah. So I'm going to bring you back to the Jamboard. We are really interested in looking at 3 specific areas. I can see quite a few people are in the Jamboard already. So, will the guidance be useful for supporting improved digital learning? Is there anything that's missing from the guidance, in your opinion? And also, what would be the best type of professional development to support use and implementation of the guidance? We welcome you to add your thoughts within this section. Tell us what you think. Share your thoughts. The same for the team from OTAN. If you have any thoughts, add them there as well.
And Caroline, can we just give a quick instruction for folks who maybe aren't familiar with Jamboard? What's the best way to contribute? Yeah.
Yeah, so if you go to Jamboard here, if you notice, Neda's kindly showing me the with her arrow there. My personal recommendation is to go to the one that looks like a little notepad, a post-it note. If you click on the post-it note, the sticky note, you can even choose your color. You get the option of choosing your color. You can write what you want to say, like, I don't know, California is better than New York. I'm here, so it's okay. And then when you press save, you can move it around. You can use the drag on your with your mouse and drag it under the question that you want to apply that answer to. And it doesn't need to go in any format. We can move that round, but it will put your answer there. And it's a fantastic way to gather information. Or if you are struggling with the Jamboard as well, use the chat as well. We can look at both. We really do want feedback. So don't worry if one is not really giving you the accessibility that you want. Just give it a couple of minutes. So we think this will help teachers. Interested to know how it will help teachers. Aha, we have another one. I do love Jamboards. If you're not familiar with them, they're wonderful in the classroom. And because they can be anonymous as well, it's great for students to be able to share their feelings without feeling too embarrassed or exposed in the classroom as well. So sound tables, love that. Each round table gets a chapter and suggest implementation strategies. That's a great point. Yeah. Any more?
They're thinking. Where are my data
know.
people at?
Oh, there's another one there. It's great.
You can make this a little bit bigger, Carolyn, so you can see.
Yeah. So I'm wondering about student attention span. TV over the years has given people about 15-minute attention span. I know I get tired of being talked to after about this time. Does anyone want to comment on attention span?
I totally agree.
Okay, somebody said they seems like everything was covered, but they haven't read the guidance yet, which is, I think we have the link in the chat here for certain.
In terms of attention span, you know, the idea of the stations really help with all of those types of things. If teachers can, how to implement that. As I know Anthony came to our site here in San Diego and taught us about the stations, and it's still the teachers learned it but haven't outputted it. I don't know how you would say that, taken it, internalized, and actually put it into use yet, but we're hoping to get there. So I think it also helps with the attention span part.
I agree totally. Rachel in the chat says she doesn't know if it's from TV. People can tune in for hours for something they're interested in. That's certainly true. I've been binge watching the show at the moment, and for me, that's certainly true, Rachel. I won't tell you what show because you'll probably judge me there.
I do, Caroline, though,
Yep.
yeah, I do want to talk about this attention span issue. You know, something, you know, kind of back to something that I referenced in our in my chat, one of my chapters about sort of the foundations, right? Adult learning theory and all that. And I think, you know, Rachel Ann kind of in the chat kind of echoed this, where, you know, I think if we're very intentional in trying to meet our student goals, right, then I think students are invested in that all the way, right? Because they know that we're listening to them, we're trying to impart the skills and training and knowledge that they're asking for, that they make clear when they state their goals in the, you know, in registration or in the class or wherever that might be. So I do feel like, you know, again, sort of hearkening back to the adult learning theory and andragogy, that if we really are paying attention to what our learners need, they're going to be with us for however long it takes, right? Because that's what they want to achieve, right? Whether it's passing the GED, whether it's earning a short-term certificate, moving up a level in ESL to the next level class, you know, whatever the case might be. We certainly have heard about, you know, our students who make use of all hours of the day to learn, right? So our adults who are very busy, who come home from work late or go to work early in the morning, if they're sitting on the bus, you know, they're on their phones, like they're learning whatever it is that they're learning, right? So adults make, you know, that's where kind of that flexible learning environment discussion also comes in, right? Are we giving our students the opportunity to learn according to their schedules and what they're interested in learning? Are we designing those environments? I think if we're intentional in doing that, our students will stick with us for however long it takes. So that's my thoughts on those.
And we've got lots of good comments coming in on the Jamboard, but also if anyone would like to put their hand up, come off mic, and talk to the group, maybe this is better served as a discussion, but carry on putting the ideas in Jamboard as well. Anyone? Ivan, we have a nice comment there in the chat. I'm wondering whether you would like to come off mute and talk to everybody. Oh, Connie?
Netta, you
Yeah,
know,
sure.
you can always count on me to say something.
I love it.
I really am concerned about the attention span thing, because just like in this session where the four of you are doing a great job, and I'm starting to fall asleep. It's 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I have already had a very, very busy work day. And I have noticed that even when I was doing some online teaching, that if I didn't engage them and have them talking to each other, that they would start tuning me out no matter what I was doing, no matter how much it involved them. But if they weren't allowed to speak also, you lose them after a while. The minds start wandering. I actually teach speech communication and how much our minds can think so much faster than what we can hear and listen. And so our minds can wander if we don't change our modes. And with all online learning, sometimes we get to be focused on just one way of teaching. So that's me. I'll be quiet now.
No, Connie, that's really great feedback and really great observation. Don't mute. You know, you're right. Absolutely. I think, you know, how do we keep the conversation going when it comes to engagement, right? And especially online engagement, so right, online learning. Like I said, you know, there is, you know, we're the same learner. Hello, we have distractions, we have kids, we have jobs, we have, you know, all the other things that are going on in their lives as it's going on in our lives. So when we make decisions, we have to kind of put ourselves in their shoes, because we are, you know, they are us, we are them. So I completely agree.
I think we have Ivan. Yep.
Yes, while you know, all of that makes perfect sense. We all deal with the challenges of this attention span challenge. But on the other hand, in real life, many tasks require you to concentrate for more than 15 minutes. Think, for example, of an air traffic controller. Think, for example, of a doctor who's on the operating table. I mean, they don't have the luxury of saying, oh, I don't want to pay attention for more than 15 minutes. So I think we also need to challenge ourselves, to challenge our students to learn to build this skill of paying attention for more than a short period of time.
Right.
I think that's a very valid point. You know, there are certain, I mean, I recently had surgery, and I'm really glad that you mentioned doctors, because I would have hated, my doctor didn't have a great attention span. So you're right, there are many tasks, and so there needs to be a balance, certainly, in education. So Neda, there's one thing I think open to the whole OTAN team really is, somebody's asking, what was the most important thing that you learned through creating this guidance? Anyone from OTAN would like to? I learned personally that California is way ahead of the curve and is doing amazing work that other states could learn from. That's my one take.
No, I'll say that one of the things that we learned in early on is just how much it was needed for everything to be in one place. How do we at OTAN combine all this that's coming at you at the agencies, all these different terms, all these different ideas, all these different pieces that you have to put together? How do we make your lives as easy as we can and include a resource where you can find that information? It was eye-opening as we were going through the process and finding and putting all this together with our colleagues and our partners, how useful and impactful this could be for the current admin, teacher, support staff that are currently in their positions, that are finding this information in all these different areas, that are new teachers that might be coming into adult education, and administrators or support staff that have no idea what adult education means, because they're probably either coming to us from a traditional K-12 or other, and need something to reference. So it was just, there's so much out there that everybody has access to, and that to us, it was eye-opening for us to be able to combine it in one place that can help digital learning move forward, because, you know, we're the lens of digital and tech and distance and blended learning, right? And so how can we take that with keeping to the true theory part and adult learning piece and all the framework and all the models and the testing requirements and you name it, right, to help support that learner. It's amazing with educators. They ultimately, the end goal is to support the learner, and so it was important for us to capture. There's so much to capture in one document. And Renee and Anthony, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I'll just I'll chime in here for a sec. So, you know, OTAN is a training organization, right? I mean, that's kind of our bread and butter here. So, you know, I've been thinking about how does OTAN use the guidance doc as maybe a way to better organize the training and resources that we offer for the field. So I'll just take OER, just for some reason OER is coming to mind. And so OER, the Open Educational Resources that we talked about, I think in chapter 3 or 4, in and of itself, OER is like a super important topic, right? It's a way to make use of free resources that are developed by educators in the field. We can customize them for our instance. We can do a lot of different things with OER. So yes, OER on its own is an important thing to consider in education. But one thing that I think the guidance might help us in the future on is maybe better placing that discussion about OER into a much larger context, right? So OER is a tool that we can also use to create more equitable environments. OER is a tool that we can use to create more accessibility to resources, right? If we can design like really sound OER that we can use in our classrooms that don't cost anything versus what we might be able to purchase elsewhere, and not saying that's a bad option. I'm just saying like, oh, well, maybe this is an opportunity to make learning and education and resources more accessible for our students and for our learners, and communities. So I really like the guidance in that regard, that, and Netta sort of spoke to this as well. Like, there's so many different topics, but we're really trying to think about, like, how can we put them all in one place? And how can we really create stronger connections for people between the topics that we're talking about in the guidance? And how do we reinforce some of these larger, like, big issues like equity and accessibility and connectivity and participation and citizenship? Like, how do we kind of make those big topics, those big ideas, more practical, and we can, in terms of like digital tools and technology that we can use in classrooms and communities and such. So that's what I really like about the guidance personally for myself.
And with that, there's a one question. I'm going to hand it back to Renee, but maybe she can start by answering this question. Somebody was asking if there will be a course that they could register to formally take them through the material in the guide and help implement their work. And with that, I'll hand back to Renee.
Thank you, Caroline. And thank you to Netta and Anthony for kind of sharing our takeaways from building the guidance. As we're down to the last 5 minutes, I actually spent about the last 5 minutes working with our Cape Tap team to try and find the accessible version to be able to be connected with the schedule. So within a short period of time, they will have that posted. They were able to find it and they will have it posted. You'll just click on the title of our presentation and you should be able to get access to the slide deck. So if you have any issues with that, certainly be in contact with us and we'll be happy to share it with you. Yes, is it exactly going to be a course? I don't know, but we are looking for ways for how do we bring this material to the field in a way that is going to be meaningful and purposeful for the work that you're doing at your site. So absolutely, those are conversations that we are having right now. We were first just very excited to be able to get this information out to the field as soon as we could. So we have created a space on the OTAN website that is, that's called the Digital Learning Guidance. And right on the very front page of the OTAN website on the right, there is a column with some buttons, and it's the very top button, Digital Learning Guidance. And you can click right there to see the PDF that was put together, as well as the 4 videos. And then in approximately December-ish, we are working with our program and development team at OTAN to be able to develop an HTML version that should make it a little more, that should chunk it up a little bit to make it more accessible for you and maybe your teachers or your peers that would maybe want to use this for professional development. But we, as I believe it was, I want to say Netta mentioned earlier, that this is going to be a living document that we are regularly looking to update and change. So, so as we have additional resources that we can kind of link to the various chapters, as we have tools that are going to help it, help you bring it to your staff, or maybe help OTAN to bring it to your staff, we will make those available on that same webpage on the OTAN website. So you can look forward to that. And all of those kind of changes are still coming this year. So it's not that we just put it out there and we're not going to be doing anything with it for the next year. We're going to be at conferences or the summits like we are today, talking about it, disseminating the information as much as we can, and really trying to figure out how to best bring it to the field, whether that be through a course or through some other means. So yeah, I appreciate that thought, though. That has been a suggestion that we're looking into. So are there any more slides, Netta, or did we reach the end? Yeah, I guess I spoke to this a little bit. All right. So I think we're at 3:56. We do have about 4 minutes. If there are any additional questions that anybody would like to come off of mute and ask or put in the chat, please do follow up with the evaluation. And we would all like to hear the feedback from you about how we did today. But we also, Cape TAP really values your feedback as well, because the feedback from the sessions really helps us to establish the practices for the next year when we offer the summit. So I appreciate you taking the time to fill it out. All right, that's all we have.
Did everybody get the slides in the chat? Okay, great. And we'll also link them to the session as well. Great, wonderful.
Thank you, Netta.
Took a while to upload. It's a big slide deck with lots of videos. So it took a minute, but thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. There's no more questions. I'd just like to say that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Let's see. I'm having trouble getting the slides. Can I just request them, or where should I get them next? You said they'll be with the presentation, link to the presentation.
Sure. Yeah.
Correct.
So one, I uploaded them to the chat, so you can download them for the chat right now, or give us, let's say, an hour and at most, and we're going to get the team from the Cape TAP team to upload it to our session. So wherever you click to come into our session, that's where it will be located for you to download.
Okay. And instead of live click now, it'll say get presentation or something. Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's spinning around and it's not letting me get in. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, everybody. That concludes the third day of the Cape Summit 2022 here. I'm trying to copy and paste that link to the evaluation in the chat again. There we go. Posting of this recording is going to be dependent upon review of these evaluations, so please make sure to take a moment and provide feedback there for us. The link to the evaluation will also be available on the session description on the conference website. Don't forget to say hi and engage with our conference sponsors and exhibitors in the chat section. And the first sessions begin tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. So everyone have a great evening. Good night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.